Thank you. Welcome to our house. This is our beloved St. Teresa's Academy, where we educate, encourage, and empower young women. And being a Sisters of St. Joseph School, what we're trying to encourage our students to do is to be advocates for social justice, to use their voices, to use their presence, to use their hearts to help change the world. And there is no better example of women who are doing that work than the Sisters of St. Joseph. Especially, we're so grateful today to be hearing from Sister Barbara and Sister Rosemary, who certainly use their hearts, their minds, and their voices and their presence to really make a difference in Selma. So we are in for a remarkable treat this morning. I have some information about them. Sister Barbara, known as Sister Ann Benedict when she went to march in Selma. She entered the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet in 1955 and is the first African American to join the Sisters. She is also a founding member of the National Black Sisters Conference. She is an alumna of Avila University, earning her BSN in nursing. She also earned her master's degree in nursing and her PhD from the University of Washington, Seattle. She's been awarded 3 honorary doctorates. What have you done this morning? Sister Barbara served as a hospital nurse. She taught and she was chair of the nursing department at Avila. She then coordinated the perinatal care program at Samuel Rogers Health Center in Kansas City, then project director for Kansas City's Healthy Start program. A past member of the congregational leadership team of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet. Though officially retired in 2015, she works with Nia Kumba, a spirituality center in St. Louis for African American and African women, particularly students at area universities. She traveled to Uganda to help microfinancing partners in Africa, an organization based in St. Louis that has provided economic opportunities to single mothers and families. Please join me in applauding Sister Barbara Moore. Next, it's my pleasure to tell you more about Sister Rosemary Flanigan. Sister Rosemary, known as Sister Thomas Marguerite, when she was one of the first of 6 nuns who marched in Selma. She received a bachelor's degree in philosophy from Avila. She also earned her master's in philosophy, her doctorate in philosophy. She entered the Sisters of St. Joseph of Carondelet in 1948. Sister served as an administrative staff member at Flanigan College. She taught at Avila, Longview Community College, and St. Teresa's Academy. How many of you here were taught by Sister Rosemary? Wow. Your students are here. She served for 17 years at Rockhurst College, now Rockhurst University, where she taught and chaired the philosophy department. In 1992, Sister Rosemary began 18 years at the Center for Practical Bioethics, where she served as the director of the ethics department, the Development and Education Committee, ethics consultant, and program consultant. A lecture series and endowed chair are named in her honor. Sister Rosemary retired in 2010, but she continues to volunteer her service. Please join me in applauding Sister Rosemary Flanigan. Wow, we are so blessed to have such wonderful, phenomenal women to share with us this morning. Before we get started, we have a prayer.
Thank you, Siobhan. With our topic today, we know that we need to just really hear this prayer, which is our charism. It's a St. Joseph prayer. Teach us to listen and not be afraid, to trust as you did in God's promise. Teach us to love courageously with a heart that is free and just. Teach us to protect one another and all that belongs to God. Teach us to dream a world where all are neighbors, a vision illumined by God's light. Teach us to keep the Word of God close to our hearts and to proclaim it in word and action. Teach us to be gentle with our power and strong in our tenderness. Teach us to be for our children a living lesson of goodness and truth, a blessing of hope for all generations to come. Teach us to live the charism of the Sisters of St. Joseph of uniting neighbor with neighbor and neighbor with God without distinction. Amen.
Amen. Mary and Sister Barbara, are you talking at the same time or to offer their remarks?
Thank you, Judy. I'm getting first because we went first.
Okay, we have chairs for you. If you want to sit, I don't think he's
This picture is March the 7th, 1965. That's 55 years ago. Think of all the people here. Look at all these young faces. They weren't even born. In 1965, television was new. In 1965, when Martin Luther King was trying to get voter registration going in Selma, the Sunday of this march has come down in history as Bloody Sunday. You saw a picture of it. State patrolmen on their horses with truncheons in their hands and uniforms on their bodies drove into this crowd of mostly young people. Did you notice how young they were? Their parents had to go to work the next day. Kids, to heck with school. So they were marching. They came over the bridge, the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, and down to go off to Montgomery, and the State Guard was waiting for them and plowed into them unmercifully, all of which was captured on TV. The next day, the clergy was having their meeting in St. Louis. Everybody is talking about the news last night. This is the first time we had seen people, American citizens, being beaten for no reason. Martin Luther King sent out another message to professional religious ministers, rabbis, priests. Would you come to Selma just to be with the people? The priests are going, what are we going to do? And Archbishop Brother is leaning against the door jamb. I imagine him leaning, and I don't believe he wasn't leaning against it, but I imagine him leaning against the door jamb, listening to all of this, and finally he said, what are you going to do? And one of the priests said, I found myself saying, we're going there. That was Monday. On Wednesday morning, we were in Lambert Field, 54 of us, mostly men, ministers, a few Jewish rabbis, lots of priests, and 6 nuns. You have those 2 Loretta sisters to thank for that. because they said to one of the organizers, Father John Shockley, "Aren't you going to take any nuns?" John Shockley, "Nuns." And they got on the phone, and they called Sister Ernest Bree. Roberta Schmidt is a Kansas Cityan. She graduated from the college over there 2 years after me. Roberta was part of the Archdiocesan Commission on Race. They called her, asked if she would come. They called the Mother Superior of the Sisters of St. Mary and asked if they would come, and the two Lorettas, and that made up the 6 of us. Tuesday night, at 8 o'clock at night, my door, I was preparing my lessons. I hope everyone knows that. And Roberta said to me, "Would you come tomorrow with me to Selma?" Sure. I didn't even have time to go down on the board and write, "I'm not going to be here." They were sitting in the classroom the next day, and nobody showed. We met at Lambert. In the picture, you didn't see it, but in the big picture that has the nuns in it, it was the habit. It was the habit. Don't tell me it wasn't the habit. That was. In that picture, I'm standing next to a big tall guy who was the dean of the graduate school, of the law school at St. Louis U. On the way down, he sat next to me, and I said to him, "Dean Childress, what's this test that a black person has to take in Selma in order to get to register?" And he said to me, "Sister, I couldn't pass it." So we flew down. We were met by a motorcade. They drove us into town. We went to Brown Chapel and spent 2.5 hours in Brown Chapel. We prayed, we sang, we listened to talks about the jobs that they were trying to do, the terrible things that were happening to them. Already there were 2 deaths. One little boy was trying to guard his mother and he was killed, and a Protestant minister who had come in from up north. Finally, the people had been coming back in and out of Brown Chapel, and we learned later what they were doing was saying, "You're not going to walk very far." We were deciding that we would walk out of Brown Chapel and walk to the courthouse, the city center. When we walked out, we were met just a few yards away. We were met by a phalanx of sheriff's automobiles facing us, in front of which was every truncheon bearer. No, they didn't carry their truncheons. They were, the National Guard, the State Guard was standing in front of their cars. I said to somebody standing next to me, "Don't get a ticket in Selma." We didn't get very far, we stopped. The minister at the Brown Chapel asked the mayor, Smitherman, he stayed mayor for years, if we could walk to the courthouse. And he said, no, there's not going to be any walking today. So they had decided inside, if they were stopped, they would ask if the guests could give testimonials of why they came. And of the 54 of us, 37 gave testimonials. You heard Roberta's. Little Sister Antona, oh God bless her, she said that her superior had come to her the night before and said, "Would you go with me to Selma tomorrow?" And she said, every bone in my body was saying no. Antona probably understood a heck of a lot better than we did what we were facing. Antona stood up at the microphone and she said, Yesterday in St. Louis, I voted. That's why I'm here today. And I thought, oh. Antonio went back and forth to Selma several times afterwards. We heard afterwards, when it was all over, when the dust was beginning to fall, we heard that when Sister Roberta called our provincial, Sister Joan Marie Gleason was the youngest provincial we had ever had. And when she called the provincial, as we used to say, to get permission, to tell her, incidentally, we're going to be out of town tomorrow. Sitting on Sister Joan Marie's desk was a telegram from Bishop Tulin. Tom Tulin was the Bishop of Alabama. The whole state was one diocese because there were so few Catholics. Bishop Tulin had written to the Mother Superior and Father Superiors of every religious group in the state, saying, keep your people home. We will take care of this problem. And when Roberta said, Sister, can we join the delegation? She said, go. I think that took a lot of courage in '65. It wasn't that she thought that Bishop Tulin didn't have the right to make all the announcements he wanted to make. But that problem that was going on, and is still going on, was bigger than anything Tom Tulin ever could have imagined. When we got down there and when we were making the declarations and things, I thought, I feel such a sense of solidarity here. Now, those were all strangers. I didn't even know the other people from the delegation. I was thinking when I was preparing this, it's sort of like this crowd, except I know so many of you. There isn't a person in here that I wouldn't feel that I could go to and say, may I have $20? I'm really up a tree. Or, would you take me home when this thing's over? Or, I've got a dental appointment Wednesday. I have no transportation. Could you? I felt that same kind of unity in that group. When 37 of us had finished saying why we came down, we all decided that we would kneel in the streets of Selma, and we were led in the Our Father together. Well, you know, Catholics and the Our Father, we stop early. The Anglicans kept on going, that was all right. And then when that was over, we were invited to the Good Samaritan Hospital, the Sister of St. Joseph of Rochester. We were invited to the hospital for lunch. What a lovely thing to do. When Dick Kraske interviewed me once, he was so disappointed that I hadn't been bloodied. I mean, no blood at all. And we flew home that day. The next day, in St. Louis, Bob Hardy from KMOX had a program called Sounding Board. And he just brought the people on and they talked about what was going on in their lives and stuff, and people called in. He said, would you two come? And we said, sure. So we came from 4 to 6. We had fielded 5,000 calls. He said, would you come back after supper? Sure, we'll come back. No classes were being prepared then. We came back after supper. By the time 10 o'clock came, there had been registered 20,000 call-ins, all the way to Canada, because at night things go farther. Most of those calls were supportive. guy from Canada said, "We're with you 113%. And I thought, oh, good for you. People have said to me, did it make a difference in your life? Of course it made a difference in your life. You can't go through something like that didn't make a difference in your life. But I want to tell you right now how glad I am that you people have asked to have Barbara and me tell this story, because I've never heard Barbara's story before. So here you go. Good morning.
Good morning.
Sister Marguerite, she's the best teacher I ever had. I had her for logic. So I don't know if my pictorial is up there yet, but I have a little different perspective. First, I'd like to start out by saying I canonized Cardinal Ritter. He was cardinal in St. Louis, and he desegregated all of the Catholic institutions in 1947, way before Brown versus the Board of Education. And I say that as a backdrop. I am a convert to Catholicism. I attended public grade school, and I must say, I really had a wonderful education. I grew up in a family where we had strong values of education, service, and Christianity. We went to church every Sunday as Baptists, and you didn't go anyplace else if you were too ill to go to church on Sundays. And in my family, you know, some had the saying, children should be seen, not heard. We were heard. We were considered because we were getting our education. And I always say I'm a child of the South. My parents were born in Mississippi, and we lived in Birmingham. My father went there for better opportunities and lived there until I was 6, until my parents divorced. Long story short, we became Catholic, my immediate family, then my mother, brother, and I. And I wanted to go to Rosati Kane. I don't know how I ever heard of Rosati Kane in St. Louis. But because Cardinal Ritter had desegregated the schools, the school for colored, St. Joseph High School for Colored, which I found out the Sisters of St. Joseph ministered, the enrollment continued to decrease, so it closed. So I got to go to Rosati Kane. That's where I met the Sisters of St. Joseph, and here I am. But I said I canonized Cardinal Ritter because he was the one who, I don't know if Bishop Toole, and I always say may he rest in peace, ever wrote the letter to about not coming to Selma, but he was very instrumental in the delegation on Wednesday, March 10th, and also in the delegation that went from Kansas City that the 12th to the 14th on the weekend. I also must talk about Mr. Vatterott. A lot of the schools have closed recently. I don't know about the economic problems, but he was a concerned Catholic. He was the one who footed the finances for the delegation from St. Louis, as well as the delegation from Kansas City. Cardinal Ritter asked him if he would do this. And if you see pictures of him in that picture of the delegation from St. Louis at the time, he had a suitcase. In the suitcase was $25,000. That was bail money in case anyone were put in jail. I received a call, I was at St. Joseph Hospital here in Kansas City, from Sister Joan Marie Gleason, whom I've also canonized. She was our provincial, to see if I wanted to go to Selma. Well, we weren't watching too much television at the time, but I had heard about Bloody Sunday. And not only the young people were marching, the old people were marching.
And one of the ones, she was like about 102, she just died about a year ago, was gassed so terribly that she had esophageal damage for years for the rest of her life. And she's the one, if you saw the pictures of the 50th anniversary, that President Obama was wheeling across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Anyway, but I'm just going to highlight several things. 1, Cardinal Ritter. 2, Mr. Vatterott. 3, we had a wonderful delegation from Kansas City. Every woman's congregation, there were 2, so we went 2 by 2. Sister Joan Treese Vinker, who was teaching here at the academy at the time, was St. Joseph companion to me. We happened to have been the same reception at the time. She's now Christine Vinker Linger. She left and was married, but we're still in touch. So the delegation from Kansas City, with the sister congregations, several priests, 1 Presbyterian minister, and the only other African American in the group, a woman parishioner. We took a commercial flight, and Mr. Vatterott footed that bill. We landed right away, and in Montgomery, Alabama, on the way to Selma, I began to realize how serious the situation was. There were people standing on the porches with shotguns, Caucasians. Trucks going up and down the highway, you could see the shotguns in the back of the truck. We went to Brown's Chapel, and the one thing that excited me so much, and still yet, is the greatest assembly of people I have been in, all faith traditions, all ages, and ethnicities represented. And they were standing around singing, just like a tree standing by the water, I shall not be moved. Well, I was so overcome with emotion, I couldn't even open my mouth. It was just so overwhelming for me. The other thing about Brown Chapel I want you to be aware of, this was a very disciplined movement. They had what they called the lieutenants. They wore their old coveralls, and a lot of women were very active also in the movement. But it was very disciplined. If you were to march, they had strategies, and they talked about nonviolence and the importance of following the strategies that we were to follow. Now they told, and I do not know the Presbyterian woman's name, I'm sorry, but they told the 2 of us, now if you are put in jail, you know you will not be put in the same cell as the other sisters. In that case, do you still want to march? Yes. Didn't know what you were getting into. But it was the Holy Spirit. It was just something about the whole. But I want to say the lieutenants of the movement, they would take turns marching because they didn't want to get beat up all the time. So different ones would get beat up during the day. And I must say, because of television and that, all of this about Bloody Sunday went all over the world, and people could not believe people of nonviolence, all ages, were really beaten so terribly. And Congressman Lewis, who now has pancreatic cancer, he was the one who was beaten so badly. And I'm glad that they had that good picture of Father Ouellette in the movie you saw. He's a saint. He's now dead. I met him. The Edmundite priests put up the priests that came. Sisters of St. Joseph of Rochester, we stayed at the hospital. Our delegation was there from Friday until Sunday. They had pallets on the floor, and that's where we slept. Father Ouellette was so active, and when John Lewis was beaten so badly on Bloody Sunday, Father Ouellette was in the emergency room when he came in. And he said he does not know how he survived. And he had no mental impairment. I subsequently met him and talked with him. But also I want you to know that Father Ouellette, and I want to mention the Cardinal Ritter and Tulin, direct opposites, and the priests of the movement. At that time, and the women, the church, the Catholic Church, was very involved and very visible in activities for human rights and civil rights. And I always say right now, for me, the voice, it's the silence is deafening. I don't hear the voices. I don't see the activity that I used to see. But anyway, after that first week in that, Bishop Tulin put Father Ouellette out of the diocese. He had to go back to the Edmundite mission up in, I think it's in Massachusetts. Anyway, I heard from his own lips subsequently when he was back for, it must have been the 45th anniversary, that it broke his heart. But Tulin died, and so he came back. But I want you to know about these people who were so dedicated to the movement. And the Sisters of St. Joseph of Rochester, none of them was able to march or participate in any of the activities. So they participated in the manner in which they were. They supported us, they clothed us, they housed us. Now people say, you marched with Dr. King. No, I did not march with Dr. King. He was not in the city because they were feared for his life. Things were so dangerous. I don't know where he was disclosed at the time. I never had the opportunity to meet him. I did meet Mrs. King. She came to Kansas City and she spoke. I was at Heart of America United Way at the time and had the opportunity to host her, and it was after one of the anniversaries, and we had a nice long chat. She had not been there, but she was very gracious, and so that was a wonderful experience for me. So in light of that, you know, here we are again. I was back for the 50th anniversary, and unfortunately the area there, the little industry they had, a lot of that is in decline. I want you to be aware that the sisters, many of them are still there. We had a physician, Dr. Cook, and Sister Jane Kelly, a nurse practitioner, who worked right outside of Selma in a clinic for many years. Sister Jane Kelly, she's still there ministering to the people and working with the Edmundite priest. She is a sister. So it was a very profound experience for me. It only instilled in me my regard to not be silent in the midst of what I saw was a terrible wrong to anyone and less known dignity. And I say history, we dare repeat it if we don't learn. So this isn't just for me a storytelling and sharing my experience, which I'm glad to do. But I see the many implications for, in my opinion, I'll own it, what's going on here and now in our country with the elections and what's going on, gerrymandering, redistricting, trying to keep people from voting, because a lot of the largest cities have a large number of people of color and minorities who do vote. And so whatever your affiliation is, it's not about that. I want you to vote. I want you to be active. I want your voices to be heard. But another thing I want to say too, is talk about pro-life. Pro-life, according to Cardinal Bernardin and other people of faith, is from conception to natural death. And a lot of these issues that we are dealing are pro-life. And we have all that's going on in the border, and our sisters are going down there, and many congregations and people of faith, associates, to assist the people on the border. We have our own borders. I came down 27th Avenue, Sister Mary Ann Donovan drove. It's a border still. We have our borders in St. Louis. So that's something to think about. But I had a wonderful, blessed experience having been here in Kansas City. I love it. I usually get mixed up. I'll be saying Kansas City when I mean St. Louis. But it's good to be back, and thank you for inviting me.
So the first question we have, it says, in your imagination, what solutions, large or small, do you wish people could do to affect change today? In your imagination, what solutions, large or small, do you wish people could do to affect change today?
I'll just say it's important to be informed. And you can do many things where you're planted. What organizations do you belong to? What's the complexion of those organizations? Do they all look like you? Or are there a variety of people there? Whom do you serve? Do you serve a variety of people? Are you able to speak up in situations? I don't mean confrontational per se, but when you are in certain situations where you're employed, your organizations to which you belong. And I think, and not that everyone here is Catholic, I understand that, whatever, but wherever you are, and particularly in your faith communities, you can encourage them to be authentic with their preaching.
Good.
So that's the next one. What were you thinking on the plane ride to Selma? And also, what did you think on the ride back?
That's my friend Mary Ann. Mary Ann Toohey asked that question. I know that on the way down, I was excited and dumb. And on my way back, I made the biggest mistake that I have ever made. I think I've made lots of mistakes. I thought because of that feeling of solidarity, that was life-changing. I thought racism is dying in this country, and I've never been so wrong.
People ask, when you were there, were you nervous or afraid? And I really wasn't. I mean, it was for God's grace. It was in the moment in that. It was when I got home. And I stepped off of the plane in Kansas City International. I could have kissed the ground. And really, I was quite teary-eyed for about 3 days. And I was at the hospital at the time. And I had the opportunity just to be and not work and relax, because it was really one of the most impactful experiences of my life when I think of all the implications. And subsequently, having gone back several times and seeing where we are now, but that was my reaction. It was afterward that I really realized I could have come back in a box.
Wow.
Thank you. This question is from someone who has 2 daughters currently at St. Teresa's Academy. Yay. They would like to know, what is your advice for young women?
You take that. Oh my, Barbara can answer this so much better. What's my hopes for black women?
Or your advice for young women.
What are my hopes for every color of every sex? And my hopes is equality. It seems so simple.
I'm very encouraged by a lot of our young people, because I think they are involved in many ways, environmentally and some of these other issues. And even no matter what grade you're in school, and I know be respectful of your teachers, but you can ask the right questions and challenge. I've always been, one of the sisters always says, Barbara, tell me what you really think. And I know you have to be prudent in that, but we have to ask the right questions. And my mother told me, and she was a wise woman, the fact that there is more than one book or article written on any subject, you do as much research as you can, and then you make up your own mind. Because some people say, oh, I read it here and I read it there, and we know we have to be careful.
This is from a proud alum of Flanigan, class of '62, Mary Ellen, is it Matika Bierman? She says, I've always been proud of the Sisters of St. Joseph. They are great singers too. The question is, Sister Barbara, where did you go to grade school? In St. Louis? And what is the best action we can take to help the civil rights movement and the pro-life movement?
I went to Richard H. Cole School in St. Louis, and as far as I know, it is still open. I don't know about the education there now, but all of our teachers were well prepared academically. They taught us, to think for ourselves. We had many wonderful opportunities for projects and things in the city. So for me, that's very important. Now, what was the other part of that?
It is, what is the best action to help the civil rights movement, the pro-life movement?
Again, in many parishes, I wouldn't say all, when you say pro-life, and we have pro-life activities in that, my understanding and the feedback I get is that it's all anti-abortion. And that is very important, the right to life. But there are, I agree with Cardinal Bernardin, womb to tomb. These issues with which we are dealing, I call it, we need, in my opinion, and I own it, systemic change. For me, it's the same question, the 100th verse. Militarism, our penal justice system, our educational system, our health care system, all of these need to be changed and, quote, updated. Now, some are doing much better than others, I think, but really, if we're educated, we're educating people to think for themselves. And so I think it's encouraging to see the young people who are involved, but be respectful, but be questioning, and read as much as you can, and be involved. I was in brownies up to senior Girl Scouts. I never heard of many wonderful activities and opportunities for service in the community and giving back, but also issues. And I never heard anything about contraception or anything like that. Now, I know the church has been through a movement where they have their own groups. That's fine as long as it's focused and whatever. But I do encourage people to be involved in opportunities where they can give back and be involved and broaden their vision and not be, many of our communities, we're isolated. We only see people like us, talk with people like us. We have to reach out, I think.
I think that's true. I agree.
Question. Were any priests in the diocese openly prejudiced during that time? Were priests in the diocese openly prejudiced?
Dear Lord.
Yes.
How many of us in our deepest bones have prejudice? Last year, I spent the entire year trying to I was just telling Mamie, trying to understand white supremacy. I'm 93 years old. I had never heard that expression until recently. I thought, white supremacy? Me? Supremacy? What? And I realized as the year went on how much entitlement I expect. You did what to me? What nerve you have. What is that? White supremacy. Do all of us have prejudice? Yes. And all prejudice is not wrong. But prejudice which discriminates unjustly is. And have some of our priests had? Of course. They're normal as we are. Right, Jerry?
I can never be as normal as you.
I don't know if any of you have read the quote, newest encyclical, I don't know what's titled, Racial Prejudice or whatever, that came out. And in each of the dioceses, not in each, but they wanted to have a hearing. And we had one in St. Louis, and they had different people to testify about examples they had experienced as members of the Catholic Church. I won't go into any of them, and I was one who testified. I won't say what I said, but I said my speech. Afterward, the Archbishop came up and said, after everyone else had gone, the 20-some of us who had testified, he apologized. He was afraid that he was so sorry. He was not aware of a lot of this, and blah, blah, blah. I thought to myself, if you had read some of my letters, you wouldn't. And I do know that they screened some of it, I don't know. But, and then I want you to know that several of the dioceses would not have a hearing. Now, this was last year, would not let them have a hearing in their diocese. So, oh, and one other thing, have you read Father Brian Massengel's book? What's the name of it? I'm blocking on that. Anyway, he wrote it a few years ago. But he's still writing, and I keep up with his writings in that. Racial Justice in the Catholic Church, I think it's something like that. He says in our seminaries, they do not have any curriculum in dealing with this issue. So a lot of our younger priests coming out, in my opinion, are not comfortable with people who are different. They don't have that experience of serving people who are different. And they seem to have a superiority complex. Now, I respect priests, but they are human beings just like I am. I do not put anyone up on a pedestal. And there's something, if you're not even getting that in your education and training and development, how are you going to be able to relate when you go out? And a lot of them do not go into the inner city parishes. And I had the bishop tell me, it was some time ago, some parish was closing. I don't know, I won't have anyone else to sit there. And a lot of our inner city parishes are closing. So the church is supposed to be universal. I see Father Wares there.
Thank you.
That title is right. For Brian Massengel's book.
Yes, it is. Were any sisters hurt? Were they hurt? Any sisters hurt in the Selma March?
Were any sisters what?
Hurt.
H-O?
H-U-R-T.
Hurt.
Hurt. Anyone?
Oh, hurt? Oh, no. Our little afternoon, remember, she stayed for a weekend. We were only there for an afternoon. We were hale and hearty when we came, and we were hale and hearty when we came home.
What was the reception like when you returned from Selma? What was the reception like when you returned?
Well, you know my reception. My reception was KMO. My reception was KMOX and all that fun. I came back to came back to classes there was such enthusiasm among the people that we met. You didn't hear any until sometimes you went home.
Oh.
And I thought, dear God, the people I teach are farther ahead than my own families. We all need a lot of reflection throughout here. Oh, yeah.
How does one best infect those who are raised with passivity, those who are passive? How can you set fire to those who have repressed passions?
Set fire, Barbara. Set fire.
I cannot make anyone do anything. What I can do is try to be who I am and my example. And I do try to be accepting of everyone, even the people with whom I differ. And I think that's probably the best stance you can have. In my opinion, it doesn't help to rant and rave and go on with people. And because, again, I'm reflecting what I would not want people to reflect back to me. Try to listen, try to be understanding. If I disagree, I will say I disagree. But again, it's better, in my opinion, just to be who you are and let them be who they are, because a lot of this is ingrained from childhood. And people do not have experiences in many ways with people who are different, and they really don't know. So maybe you're the only one that they have an experience or opportunity to talk with. And so, again, it might be baby steps, and even the fact that you listen to them or talk with them might be a first start. I can only handle who I am and my actions. I can't make anyone do anything.
I came home, and the sisters at Avila called me up and said, we called your dad and said, aren't you proud of Rosemary? Sister Margaret Reinhardt, God bless her, what a good name. And she said there was a pause. My dad wasn't evil racist, but he was scared to death when he heard that I'd gone down there. It was fear. And so after that pause, he said, I guess she did what she thought she had to do. And he thanked her and hung up. You know, I think of it with our Muslim friends. I didn't meet a Muslim woman until I was in my 60s. We had one at St. Joe's Hospital. Oh, she rose up the ranks. She was smart as the day Minaj Shabir. And I remember talking to Minaj. I didn't know modern Muslims. Why not? Because we never mixed. I said to Mamie, it took me until I was in my 70s to have a black friend. Why? Because we never mixed. If you don't have experiences, you can't love what you don't know.
That's right.
You're here till 11.
So, Sister Rosemary, this is for you. Did you ever meet Dr. King?
No. Barbara explained why Dr. King didn't come. And he wasn't there. say, I love this, and I just read this when I was preparing for this. When we walked into Brown Chapel, one of the historians wrote a book, and he heard something I did not hear. He heard Andrew Young, who was at the mic, say, as he saw the habits coming through the door, ladies and gentlemen, here is the greatest moral force in our country. That is humbling. May we still do that in our diminishment.
I would like to point out that many of the men involved in the movement were ministers. And that says a lot, you know, for the men of faith. And I do want to say, Dr. King, he's probably known a lot for the nonviolence in Selma and that, but the civil rights movement was not only a civil rights movement, it was a moral movement.
Yes, it was.
And also, he spoke out about many issues at our prayer service at Carondelet last month. I mentioned the whole thing about the environment. He had talked about issues years ago that for us to be more concerned about that. He was against the Vietnam War and all the issues concerning that. And some of the other things. So he was not a one-issue person. I say he was an ordinary person who did extraordinary things. And his wife said, I mean, he wasn't look at her sacrifice, he was gone most of the time. And I did read her biography written by her daughter, Mrs. King, and he was not perfect. You know, he was gone a lot, his clothes were lying around, he'd throw them around, but he was not a one-issue person. And we can't be one-issue person because a lot of these issues are interrelated. And we begin to see the relationship among them, I think it will help. And also, a better quality of life, not only for those who are, quote, disadvantaged, but for all of us. Look what we're facing with this virus that's coming. Do you think it's going to be discriminatory?
One of my students is here, Josie Fox. Can you raise your hand, Josie? And thank you, Josie. So Josie is interested in social justice. She wants to know what's the most important thing she should keep in mind. She's interested in social justice. What's the most important thing she should keep in mind?
Justice is founded on love. You can't be just if you don't love. If you can't teach your children to love one another, how can they possibly be just?
It's the foundation where you begin. Treat people as you would like to be treated. And that it doesn't matter, you know, what I think of you or whatever, just treat people with respect. You don't have to like everybody. I mean, that's a miracle if you do. But treat people with dignity and respect. And we need a lot of that in our society today, I think.
This question says, I am a voice of passion in a 100% Hispanic classroom. I lead by example, but I am still a white voice speaking to their oppression. What should I do? What then? A white voice in a 100% Hispanic classroom, leading by example. What else to do?
When I say join the club, I was one. Many of us, I should say many of you probably have never been had the opportunity or even been in a group where you were the only one. I've been in so many groups for years that I was the only person of color. I have served on boards in every one of our institutions through the years. I talked about diversity. I've made so many lists of people, not just African American, but Hispanic people. Now, give me some names of people. We can't find anybody or whatever. But believe me, someone said, well, suppose you're just a token. I said, they might think I started out as a token. They have got a token when I'm there.
Right.
And that token, even if you are a token, that token has a voice, and that token has the responsibility to speak the truth.
Yeah.
That young teacher in that Spanish thing, she tells it as she sees it. She's true to herself, and therefore she's true to her students.
Okay, this one's a little political, so.
Lord.
Okay. You said earlier we need to restructure change to change our country. Is Bernie Sanders the best candidate? I'm not done. Is Bernie Sanders the best candidate to actually embrace pro-life, womb to tomb? Is Bernie Sanders the best candidate to embrace womb to tomb?
By their actions you shall know them. I'm waiting to see. I don't know who is the better candidate at this point. I really can't say. But I'm praying about it. I'm trying to read and be sensitive. I have no idea. Again, do your research. I'm doing mine. I'm listening. I'm praying and hoping for the better. But no, I really don't know. And people say, well, you say one thing. All you can do is do your research, look at what they have done in the past, and make a decision. But make a decision, please.
Yep.
And I'm with her. I do not know. I, honest to God, do not know. And it's getting close to November.
Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much. I'm going to now turn the program over to Carol. She has some announcements. Or some, she has something.
We've ended a little early if there are more questions, but Carol Coburn, you were instrumental, you were at the Sisters Archives in.
I was a consultant for Sisters of Selma and have done research and writing on the issue. Yes, so I got an opportunity to interview the wonderful sisters you've heard from today, as well as many others, working with. You may be interested to know that the producer and writer of Sisters of Selma is a Hindu woman from India who got her graduate work at USC and then got very involved in various issues, and she did a great job, and it was a wonderful opportunity for me to do that. I have two things I want to say, not an announcement, that I think you ought to know, this audience, because you've heard wonderful first-person scenarios, and I would encourage you. We have all the Sisters of Selma materials at Abilene University. We are archiving all the materials. We will own the rights in 2021. So we're very invested at Avila in terms of this material. The two things that I think might be of interest to you that will add a larger context. One is that the Midwest Sisters were very instrumental. There was a little note on one that said Midwestern Sisters came first. They came in the largest numbers. And this is not a, so within Catholic America in 1965, 75% of the sisters who ended up in Selma came from Midwestern cities. So I think that might be interesting to you as we're Midwesterners. And the top 3 Midwestern cities, Chicago, Kansas City, and St. Louis. That's an interesting Catholic fact because as a historian, typically we see movements starting on coasts and moving to the middle. So I just want you to know Catholics in the Midwest were on top of this one first. The last piece is even broader than that. The Selma events and the sisters traveling there were multiple marches. The march to Montgomery actually did not happen till the very last week in March, where they marched all the way from Selma, the 56 miles. This event was a springboard to Catholic sisters moving into all manner of social justice from there. This one event, and as historians we often can't say that, and I don't look for that one piece, but this particular event in Selma and the sisters' participation in that put them on a different trajectory. You have Vatican II ending in 1965, you have Vietnam, you have civil rights, you have the women's movement, you have all the isms that are beginning to be challenged in the 1960s into the 70s and 80s. And sisters who for the most part had dedicated their lives for a century, century and a half to institution building, particularly schools, hospitals, social service kinds of things, in large numbers moved into the broader range and really began to look at, and I think Sister Barbara used this word, systemic injustice. In other words, I can help a person and that's a very good thing. I can help a group of people and that's a very good thing. But sisters began to, and a lot of it was because they were very well educated as women at that point in time, because they were filling their colleges and universities with PhDs in many cases. They began to study systemic, or in what we call institutional discrimination. And that's a different level. And in some cases, I think that got them into political trouble within their congregations or sometimes with the church at large, because the hierarchy wasn't quite there yet in many cases. So I want you to know that as well, that this Selma event is great to commemorate, very proud that we have Kansas City and Sisters of St. Joseph as a part of this, but it goes much bigger than that, because sisters then move into everything from environmental issues, as I said, civil rights, anti-war, peace building, and they're still there. They're still very much a part of things like the sanctuary movement and poverty issues, gay and lesbian rights. You look at the large variety of social issues that sort of took off on a different trajectory from mid-century to now, and where we're at. Sisters have been there. And as a historian, I argue very strongly, and that's always dangerous to do as an academic, to argue too strongly because somebody's going to counter it. But I'm arguing very strongly that this particular event really was important. The photograph of the 6 sisters in that first march was taken by an Associated Press photographer. It was in every major U.S. newspaper the next morning. And what was significant, that was the first national demonstration, public demonstration, that Catholic sisters had ever participated in. And it blew up. I mean, the papers loved it. That was their photo op, and it's an iconic photograph at this point from that day. And that, and at KMOX, with the sisters in St. Louis, Sister Roberta Schmidt and Sister Rosemary, you also got a lot of flack on those radio. We tried to get, actually, the tapes. They were not saved, unfortunately, the tapes from the radio show. We haven't been able to find them. We've looked very hard. But there was a lot of hard-hitting stuff. And a lot of the sisters, they mention it later in the film, were getting letters, what we would call hate letters at this point in time, in terms of how dare you. You've really done terrible things, and you're communists. And that sounds funny, but that's the kind of the rhetoric that this inspired. So I just want you to also think about this in terms of the really global importance and impact of this, because Most religious communities, the larger ones, are global communities now. And that's really something that they're working with within their own diversity and with the issues, because our issues are global now, much more so than they were even 50 years ago. So just to give you a bigger things to think about in terms of where this fits in and how this one event, in many cases, was a springboard for many, many things to come.
This is not a one event. One thing that we've heard from our series, people want more. So we are working, so please, if we have your email addresses and that, and check our website, we will have follow-up to this. And if you have other questions you think of too, we will get this going. Follow up on October 24th at Avila, we're gonna have a panel discussion led by Carol and 4 panelists discussing where do we go from here. So in between time, you can be thinking of it and invite your friends too, because what can we do? We can talk about it, but how can we make a change? So I think I speak for everyone, we're so impressed with all of the sisters and what they do. And also thank you, Sister Helen Flemington. When every spring we come up with what we're gonna do the next year, because it's hard to book these sisters, they book in advance, they're busy. I tried to take them to lunch yesterday and they were already booked up, so. Anyway, and Sister Helen so nicely said, you know, this is what the sisters are doing. It's care for creation, dismantling discrimination, and promoting peace and equality and nonviolence. So there are 3 things they're working on. How nice. You're like, okay, that's, sure, we'll do this, we will do this. So next year we'll see what we focus on, but they're always out there and they're making us think and having us go more. So like they said together, we're more, and thank you so much for coming.